Okay. All right. Why don't we get started? Thank you, everybody, for joining tonight. Welcome to PLACE NYC's High School Admissions Information Session. Tonight we'll be talking about the newly announced high school admissions process, how it works, and how it's going to affect students' admissions to our high schools. This is covering almost all of the high schools. They've tweaked it a little bit to account for a handful of high schools to do things a little bit differently. And I think if everybody has seen, they have postponed the high school admissions application deadline to March 11th. So they've given everybody a few more days. I'm Lucas Liu. I'm the president of PLACE NYC, and tonight we have our members Deborah Cross and Hunter Dare, who will be presenting tonight. So during the session, if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll address your questions throughout the session tonight. Okay, and so I'll turn it over to Deb. Deb, you can introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Debbie Cross. I'm a parent of an 8th grader, like many of you. I'm also, so I have an 8th grader. I also have an older child who's a junior, and I have a 6th grader. So I've been in the New York City public school system, experiencing a lot of things for a while. I'm also an elected parent representative on CCHS, which is just like your CEC, but it's for high schools and it's citywide. So that's how I got closer to this process, and CCHS has actually been fairly active around this high school admission process. And I can talk about that later in the presentation. So do you want, Lucas, do you want me to get started, or you're on mute?
All right. Yes, why don't we go right ahead?
Okay, so just for everybody, the plan is to talk about this presentation for 20 minutes or so and really have a long Q&A session afterwards. So please write down your questions and we'll try and answer to the best of our ability. So high school admissions, what is happening this year? So maybe before I talk about the admissions process, what I'd like to do is show you results for a survey that many of you took. The survey was put out by a group of parents who are concerned about the screen high school application process as presented by the DOE about 2 weeks ago. And the results, so as of last night, we had 520 people who responded. And it talks about the high school application process in New York City. Then it drills down into what's going to happen for screened high schools. And second, trying to understand how parents feel about the policies that are being implemented and what are the alternatives. So the first slide is, is this application process easy, not easy? And overwhelmingly, people find it complicated and they disagree that it's been made easy. This is my second time and it's still not very intuitive. And it certainly takes away too much time from my day. The second slide is more focused about the screened process and understanding how it works. So it seems like there's a good understanding of what the new rules are. 71% get it. But people have been asked what else they would like to see in the My School system, which shows your child's information as well as allows you to rank those schools. And it seems like an overwhelming majority of people would like to see the grades to calculate the group, which are now shown in My School. We launched that survey about a week ago and they were not shown, but now if you go into My Schools, you will actually see the grades. You will not see the group number, but you will see the 4 grades. The lottery number, which we'll talk about, as well as context to understand the lottery number. 3 people out of 4 would like to see that. A pretty scary question or answer is, do you believe that the process for screen high school placement is fair and equitable? And 81% of the respondents say it's not. Most importantly, it seems that parents are losing faith in the public education system because when asked if the current DOE policies will provide the best opportunity for my child to reach their fullest potential. The responses are overwhelmingly parents disagree. So in terms of alternative, we have asked parents what else they're looking at. So a range of options, 46% are looking at private schools, 29% are looking at Catholic parochial schools. People are looking at charter schools as well. But 55% of the parents are saying they're considering living in New York City, which seems to comfort the information that's available about declining enrollment in New York City schools. A lot has been blamed on COVID, but I think the uncertainty around admissions is also something to be blamed. But there are also parents who just don't have any choice. Hello? Yeah, there'll be some Q&A time shortly. So that was the result of the survey. I would like to now go over, what's happening with high school applications. So the My School account, which I'm sure you've had a chance to look at, has a lot of information. It has the student's profile, the famous OSIS number, but it also has in there whether you are zoned for high school, which for us in Manhattan doesn't happen, but it is the case for certain people in Queens or Brooklyn, I believe. If your child is in the general education or student with disability program, if your child has an IEP or not, the full priced meal or free and reduced price lunch, which is an old DOE denomination. It's important because many schools have a diversity in admissions priority or set aside bucket. And so if your child has free reduced price lunch, they would qualify for those seats. And then recently, the DOE added the grades in the 4 core subjects, as well as the period that's applicable. Then in My School, you can find information about schools, such as location, number of students, how the school's performing, what kind of classes they offer in terms of languages, APs, if they have more of a focus on STEM or writing. There's a link to a school report data, which has more standardized and specific information from, well, obviously there's racial information about who attends the school, but there's also like how many students take AP classes, again, information about graduation, college attendance, and so on, and how the school compares to the rest of the schools in Manhattan. There is the priorities for admission, so whether the school takes people in a certain zone, whether there's borough priority, whether there is a continuing middle school, so students that would have been in that middle school would have priority to continue in the high school, whether there is a priority for diversity in admissions, and then the school outlines the admissions methods. So some of these schools have academic screens. EdOpt is educational option. It means that these are schools that are meant to admit a range of students with various performance. So historically, they would take a certain percentage of students scoring 4 on tests, a certain percentage scoring 3, a certain percentage scoring 2 and 1, and they would mix that up. It's not clear how they're going to do this year because there are no test scores, but maybe based on grades. But the goal is to mix abilities, and so it essentially works like a lottery among those groups. Then there's pure lottery, not looking at grades at all. There are the schools called the consortium schools, which are Beacon and a few others that require an essay for admission. And then there are the audition school for a special talent, whether it's singing or visual arts, theater, etc., where you have a specific audition. The seats offered and the number of applicants per seat are provided, both for the general education and for students with disabilities in each school. So the way you're going to apply is you're going to rank up to 12 schools. You don't have to rank 12 schools, but it makes sense to rank 12 schools. Remember, some schools have multiple programs. For example, Frank Sinatra in Queens, you could rank a visual arts program and a dance program, but that takes 2 spots. You rank it in your true order of preference, because if you get your school number 4, but then you decide that you want to go to your school number 6, you're done. You got number 4. So you don't have the option to change that. So think about it. You have also any additional information you would need to submit, for example, essays, audition material, etc., and that you submit through the My School site. I haven't tried yet, so I can't tell you if it's successful or not, but it's supposed to be through the site. The deadline, as you all know now, has been extended until March 11. So we have 22 days to go. Just note that any application to LaGuardia or to the specialized high schools, that's not part of the 12 spots. When are you going to hear? In May, probably. That's the word. And after you hear of your placement, you are automatically placed on a wait list for any schools that you listed above the school that was given to you. So for example, back to my example, if you get your 4th school, you would be placed on a wait list for schools 1, 2, and 3. And then you also have the option to add yourself to more wait lists in more schools, but you would go after the students that are already on those wait lists. In terms of resources to apply to schools, so this year we're still virtual, so it hasn't been like 3 years ago when I applied for my oldest child, but My School has quite a bit of information on each school. Then when you go to My Schools, you do have that link to the NYC net, which gives you the school snapshot. Middle school guidance counselors can help. You can have virtual tours, and many schools actually recorded videos on their sites. So even if you missed the date of the tour, you probably didn't miss much. Some schools, actually, I was surprised, offer in-person tours. And I actually recently toured a school in person. I called the school and the parent coordinator called me back and they gave me a tour. Now, I don't know that this happens in super popular schools, but you might as well try, especially if you're looking at schools that are a bit under the radar screen. Try your luck. I got a private tour for a whole hour and it was awesome. Also, talk to parents that have children in the schools you're interested in, your friends. They may have older siblings at those schools, and social media, of course. So now I'm going to pass it on to Hunter, who is going to discuss the methodology for screened high schools and how screened high schools are going to admit their students this year.
Thanks, Debbie. So I want to start off just kind of going through the basics. I know a number of you already know how this works, but for anybody that doesn't, I want to try to make it absolutely clear. The first thing that's going to happen is the DOE computer system is going to look at grades they're going to take the end of 7th grade, the end of year 7th grade grade. They're going to look at the first and second marking periods of 8th grade. Many of you may not have had the second grade for 8th grade, but those will be considered as well. And they're going to look at the numerical values of those grades, whether it be a 99 or a 72, and they're going to take the highest of those 3 grades for each of the core subjects. So for ELA, they will look at 3 grades and they will take the highest of those grades, and that will be your ELA grade for the purpose of high school admissions. They will do the same for math, the same for science, and the same for social studies. Then they will map those grades to a certain number of points. Any grade, which is the highest of the 3 periods, that falls between 85 and 100 will be mapped to 400 points or worth 400 points. Any grade in the 75 to 84 range will be 300 points, 65 to 74 range, 200 points, and so on. Then they will take the average of those 4-point values. And if that average is 350 to 400, then that student will be considered part of group 1 or tier 1. They will have the highest priority within other priorities, such as diversity admissions priority, or within a special ed bucket, or within the general admissions bucket. They will have the highest priority within their respective buckets. Then next would be, if there are still seats after tier 1 is placed, then tier 2, they would look at all the kids in tier 2 and have a lottery among those kids. So students, let's see, I got something covering up part of my screen. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Right, so let's go to the next page. So, basically I want to walk through 2 students that could end up in tier 1. Student A had an end of year 7th grade score of 65. And then they had an 85 and a 70 in their 2 8th grade marking periods for ELA. That would be an 85 for ELA. Looking at math, student A had 65, 65, and 70 in the 2nd 8th grade period. They would have a 75 for math. And you would map each of those things to points, and so on. Social studies 85, science 85. They would get 400 points for their 85s, 300 points for their 75s, and that would average out to 350 points. And that would be considered tier 1. From what we understand, a grade of MT is worth 300 points. So if you had an MT and an 85 in your grades for a particular subject, then that would be a 400. If you had an MT and a 65, that would be 300. Now let's compare another type of student, and this student's gotten A pluses in all their subjects. They had in ELA 97, 98, and 99. That's a 99 for ELA. For social studies, a 98, a 99, and 100. That's 100 average for that. But unlike previous years where they average your actual numeric scores, each of those scores maps to a particular number of points. And a 100 maps to 400 points, as we see in social studies, the same as an 85 maps to 400 points. This student would have an average of 400 points. They would also be assigned to tier 1. Next slide, please. So we've already seen how a student like Alfie, who's had all A pluses along the way, is going to be in the same group with students like Charlie, who had 2 85s and 2 75s, and even a student like David, who has 3 85s and a 65, also would average out to 350 points. But I want to talk also about students like Ellen and Francis. One of the other concerns about the system is there are kids that can have much higher GPAs and end up in group 2. So for instance, Ellen could have 3 84s, which each map to 300 points, and a 100 in science, which maps to 400 points. She would have a 325 average. That would mean she is group 2 with an 88 overall average. Or similarly, a student could have 2 99s like Francis, an 84 and a 74, and have an 89 average, and also be mapped to group 2. So there's a disconnect from what was done in previous years with average GPA to what is being done in this year. It's really all about the mapping as much and the grouping where your grades fall within a group than it is about your actual average. So
Okay.
guess at that, I'll turn it back over to Debbie.
All right. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about lottery numbers because basically what is happening is in addition to these screens, when you're applying to high school, whether or not you apply actually to a screen program, as an applicant, each child is going to get a single lottery number that is randomly generated by the DOE. It's a hexadecimal number, which means it starts with either a number from 0 to 9 or a letter from A to E. That's 16 possibilities. And so what makes a good number, what makes a bad number? So I put in 2 examples on the screen. You know, the closer to the 0 you are, the better your number. So for example, something that starts with 3B is considered a really good number. Something that starts with a D is not considered a good number. And that's actually what I got last year for middle school. And I was not too happy. So how do you get your lottery number? There are 2 ways to get it. The fastest way to get it is to send an email to highschoolenrollment@schools.nyc.gov to obtain it. I got mine in a week. There are people who report that they got theirs in 20 minutes. I think it's sent by batches, so don't get too impatient. You give your child's name, your child's OSIS number, and they should respond to you with your lottery number. If you want to read more on understanding lottery numbers, I put in some links, and I think Lucas will give access to this presentation so that people have the links. So you can read about how these work and how these determine where you rank in what your odds are to get into schools. So how is that lottery number used by the DOE? So the lottery comes into play when there are seats available for a particular priority group. So that could be a zone school, which has 100 seats, and there are 200 people in the zone that apply. You have more applicants in the group than seats. But that could also be based on screen schools, where schools tell you we take first people from group 1, that you have 500 applicants from group 1 and 100 seats in a program. So then the 100 seats are given to the strongest lottery numbers for those seats. So the concern here is that we expect that there's going to be a very large pool of group 1 applicants because of the very broad grouping that Hunter was just describing, which means that the screen programs, which historically looked at their applicants' grades, test scores, attendance, some of them even had on-site tests. Now it's going to be down to a lottery as long as your child is in the group 1. There was a question in the chat about diversity in admission and generally gen ed and students with disability. So first, if you look in my schools, when they tell you how many seats there are per schools, there are buckets. So a school that has 100 seats may have 80 seats for gen ed, 20 seats for students with disability. So they're going to fill those separately. So your child is applying and you know what your child is from the My School profile, and your child is eligible either for a gen ed seat or a student with disability seat. When a school has a diversity in admission set aside, for example, a school that says a 50% diversity in admission set aside, if we take again the example of a school with 100 seats, there is a lottery for those applicants. So the diversity in admission students, and again, that is on your My School profile, would get ranked with, group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, based on their academic results. And then there's a lottery among the people from group 1, and that may fill the 50 seats. And same on the other side for non-diversity in admission seats, there is again a lottery among applicants from group 1. So we think it's very important to ask for the lottery number. Some people may say, well, why do I want to know if it's a bad number? I think I would want to know for two reasons. The first one, I think it allows you to have a more realistic expectation and also have a better approach when you create your list of 12 choices. For example, if you do have a bad lottery number, I think it's important to not only rank schools that are screened and that are going to be in high demand. Some of them you see in my schools, they have like 60 applicants per seat. And in a lottery situation, the chances of getting in with a bad lottery number are very slim. And then also there could be some options outside the DOE, whether it's obviously applying to private schools or religious school, but that deadline is, I think that's something that you may have had to do a little earlier, but there may still be options there. Charter schools, you can apply to charter school and it's centralized. There is also a lottery for charter schools, but there's a website where you can apply to multiple charter schools now. Or, you know, some people will move out of the city, etc., like what we saw in the poll results. Other changes, so attendance is no longer considered. That's kind of a thing of the past. It used to be considered in high school processes 2-3 years ago, but not anymore with COVID. State scores, I think 1 student out of 5 only took test scores last year. So clearly it's not a metric that can be used this year. And then another thing that's important is all admissions decisions are made centrally by the DOE. Historically, each school was providing a list and ranking people for the DOE. Now the DOE is doing it. Small caveat is, I think if there's an essay in the application process, the essay is not read by the chancellor. It's somebody at the school who reads the essay and, you know, decides which students they want to rank. Just some perspective based on what happened last year. So last year was not this lottery process. However, some schools had already, some screen schools had a lottery process. For example, a school like Elro went from ranking students to saying that they would lottery among students that had an 85 in all core subjects at a minimum. So there was a lottery among those. And also what happened last year is that district priorities were eliminated, which for, I'm a District 3 parent, so it didn't affect me, but I know it affected some parents in District 2. So last year, 7% of people who applied to high school did not receive any of the 12 choices that they ranked. District 22 in Brooklyn, 11% didn't receive it. District 15 in Brooklyn as well, it was 9%. In District 2, that was 18%. In District 3, that was 12%. If you live in Manhattan, there's a sentiment that parents applying to high school are really at a disadvantage because, as you may know, in other boroughs, there are borough priorities for schools. We have some in Manhattan, but these are not any of the screened programs that people typically look at. So we are at this disadvantage of, you know, not having borough priority for kids. So what are we doing about this, and what can you do about this if you're not happy? So first of all, as parents, you are represented by your district CEC, and if you have children in high school, by your CCHS. If you have children with an IEP, by CCSE. If you're an English language learner, by CCEL. So you can reach out to your CC, and in fact, multiple CCs in the city passed some resolutions to express to the DOE that this was completely unfair and not acceptable, and that this process should be revisited. So at CCHS, we passed one. I know District 2 passed one. District 20 looked at one as well, and multiple CCs in Queens are looking at similar resolutions. But you have to know that these resolutions are non-binding. So we're not writing law at CCs. We're just expressing the parent's opinion for the DOE to see. You should absolutely write to the chancellor and the first deputy chancellor. I'm sure they'd love to hear about you and all you think about this process. Inundating with emails would be a good thing. You should also reach out to elected officials. There has been some press coverage about the topic. The New York Post has been particularly vocal about it, but I think it's important to attract attention on it. There's also an online petition that was started on admissions, and then possible solutions. So I know that in our resolution in CEC, we proposed a number of things. The first one was to delay admissions, which that was done until the 11th. That's not much, but that's better than what we had. Maybe allowing schools to have their own admissions method. There's no reason not to have that. In fact, the DOE is making an exception for the consortium schools rather than a centralized method. And that could be, you know, giving graded work from 7th grade, writing an essay, doing a test, etc. Another option would be like a clean GPA ranking, because if you saw what Hunter was presenting, clearly that's not, the grouping is very flawed and not reflecting what the real GPA of your child is. And then also narrowing those bands, because ultimately, if we could reduce that lottery side, I think it would be more accurate to maybe distinguish a child with like a 99 average from a child with an 80 average. But that's just my view. So with that, I will pause and open it for questions. And I will unshare my screen, but we can go back to the slides if you'd like.
Just really quick before we hop into Q&A. So just two things. One, we will circulate the presentation afterwards. And two, Deborah mentioned writing letters. So what we'll do, we've put together a template that people can use and who to send it to. This is a letter, you know, about the admissions process, the high school admissions process, where we think there are shortcomings in the process. And it would be great if everybody could send the letter, the email, to the folks listed on the email, and we'll circulate that to everybody. And feel free to modify it to you know, add your own personal story to it or change it how you see fit. But the underlying point that you want to get across is that this process may not be fair for all students. Okay. Thank you.
Do you want me to take the Q&As from the chat? I mean, a number of people put some questions in the chat. I could address those first because some of them are recurring, and then we can have participant Q&As.
Sure. Why don't we hop back and forth?
Okay, so I'll do that quickly. So so somebody asked about non-numerical grades from last year, because there are some schools that gave MTs, or you know, sometimes schools gave you grades, but the DOE deleted grades. So I think there are grades this year. So if your child has a grade this year and it will, and it's better than the MT from last year, I think the MT is worth 300. So if your child has a 90 this year, they'll get the benefit of the 90. And if your child has a 60 this year, maybe they'll get the benefit of the 300 that they get from the MT. So remember, it's a concept of the better off. So I think it will play out favorably. There was a question about specialized high school, several questions about specialized high schools and whether those are screen schools. So no, the screen schools we're talking about tonight are not the specialized high schools. If your child took the SHSAT back in December, that is a completely separate process. So, so that's a pure score. Your child takes a test, they get a score, and they get an offer or not at one school. And they may end up where they get an offer to one of the specialized high school, as well as in this process, an offer to a non-specialized high schools, but it is completely independent. So whatever changes the DOE has announced on screen schools, that does not affect the SHSAT and the specialized high schools. So yes, we'll be sharing the deck. Somebody was saying they know their lottery number and it's bad. Should they put their zone school as the 12th choice, or should they put the zone as the first choice? since they know. Well, so if you have a zoned school,
Maybe I can
good
take that.
yeah, do you want to take that, Hunter?
Sure. So wherever you list your zone school, any school you list below that, you will not get that school. You will get placed at your zone school wherever you list it. So if there are 10 schools you would rather attend than your zone school, then you should list all 10 of those schools ahead of the zone schools. If you do not list your zone school and your zone school is overfilled, it is possible that you will be assigned to a random school or a school that has empty seats rather than your zone school. So it is important that you do list your zone school if you would prefer it over a random choice, which I assume most everybody would.
There was a question about the lottery numbers. Are they just randomly selection? Is it a random selection of numbers? So I think the question is, how are these numbers generated? And they're generated by a computer. It's a very long string of numbers. Supposedly it's one number per student. I think the exception might be twins, which may get the same number if they want to go to the same school. But otherwise it's completely randomly selected. There's no indication that it's predicated on zip code or anything like that. So it's just a random number.
And also on that, basically you have one number, and as soon as you enter My Schools for this year, that number was assigned to you. And it's really not a lottery number per school. Really, the way it works is that is kind of the order in which your application is considered. And so if you have a low number, what happens is your request for 12 schools or however many schools you put down gets looked at toward the end. And so by the time by the time they've gone through all the people that are ahead of you in lottery numbers, then the screen schools will most likely all be filled up by that point. And to be clear, some of the screen schools with some of their buckets of priority, such as IEP or special needs kids, might go beyond tier 1 kids for those screen schools. We're not clear, but tier 1 is very large. So it's likely that anybody that's outside of tier 1 will not have an opportunity for a screen school, particularly if they're part of the general admissions pool.
Mute. Yeah, somebody asked, about when I said the attendance is a thing of the past. I mean, attendance hasn't counted last year. It won't count this year. I don't think it will count next year either. I know it used to be that we would tell our 7th grader to go to school dead or alive, but with COVID, I just don't know that this is true anymore. I just don't know that attendance is really going to be a criteria that is considered in future processes, but of course we don't know what it's going to be next year. So it's hard to say. But if I had to bet, I would say attendance is probably off the table at that point. I would hope test scores come back as long as tests can happen. But obviously this year with 20% of the kids taking the state test, it was probably not meaningful.
Somebody questions from the folks here.
Okay, sure.
Their hand raised. So why don't we go to Anthony? You want to unmute yourself? You can unmute yourself.
Hi, my name's Jenny. I do have a question regarding the lottery number, because you mentioned the machine randomly generate the lottery number, but you also mentioned there's a bad number and good number, because I have a twins in different school. One in your school 187, the other one in the IS 98. So you means I will get one number for two of them, or I will get two numbers if their application is the list of the child school is different. Am I getting one number for two, or are we getting two different numbers? And what do you mean by bad number and good number?
Do you want me to try and take that? Because I think there's a rule now that if you're filling an application for twins and you want your twins to be together, you can have a single number, which means they get placed in the same school. But I don't know practically how that works. And I don't know anyone with twins applying.
Yeah, that's definitely the case in middle school. For middle school admissions, I'm not clear if they're doing the one number for twins for high school or not.
But I think you request that, right? If you want your twins in the same school or if you don't. For some reason, I thought they would get separate numbers, but then on your application, you indicate that you want them together.
How do I indicate in my application I want them in together? There's a line for me to fill out, or I just put them in the same list of the number, like in their separate application, I put them in the same list. I mean, same list of schools, same order.
Somebody's saying that for twins, your list of high school has to be exactly the same for the two children. I mean, yeah, to be honest, I don't know the answer to that.
I think in the application process, when you log in, if you have twins, I think you have to indicate somewhere in there, there is a way to indicate that you want them to go to the same school.
But
okay,
there
yeah,
are sorry.
Yeah, somebody in the chat says that they are going through the process, they have twins, and that they asked for this clarification from the DOE, and the DOE said that you have to put your list, the same list for the two twins, which means you want them together. But I would, if I were you, I would email high school enrollment just to clarify it.
Okay, so their experience indicate if I want them together in the same school, I just put the same list on the application. That's their experience. If I don't want them together, if they have their own preference, so they just go by their own decision, right?
So you would make two lists.
Yeah, based on their experience, like the prior, the parents' experience. So, and then my second question here is, I don't understand the lottery number. I thought when they do lottery, nothing to do with the number, good or bad. It's just the chance. What's the lottery result? But when you explain there's a good number and bad number, that means the good number what is the good number? What's the bad number?
Okay, a good number would start by 0, 1, 2, 3. A bad number would start by, D, E, F. So basically, the closer to 0 you are, the better your number. And then you go closer to 9, and then A, B, C, D, E. So
the first number. You mean
it's the first
digit?
Yes, correct. And so it's really the first two digits that matter for the lottery. So let's say somebody who has a 2, 3 and somebody who has a 2A, the 2, 3 would be ahead of the 2A.
And to be clear, if you have a lottery number that starts with 0, 1, 2, or 3, then you're in the top 25% of lottery numbers. If your lottery number starts with D or C, D, E, or F, then you have a lottery number that's in the bottom 25% of numbers. And if you have one that starts with 0, that's in roughly the top 6% of all lottery numbers.
So how does the lottery work? Because my understanding is I am in the group 1, and then there's a 300 not low-income family people students apply for 76. So they put the 500 number in there and then come out with 770 numbers. it's a lottery. So it's the same chance. But the way you explain to me, it's not work like that way, right?
Okay, so when you go into My Schools, after you add your kids and you fill out the application, you have to indicate which ones are twins and that you want them to go to the same school. It's part of the application process.
Okay.
All right, Joyce Mark.
Let me just unmute her. Joyce, are you able to unmute yourself?
Okay, why don't we come back to Joyce? Sarah Ferguson, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this presentation. So I had a question about ranking schools, and from my understanding, when come March 11th, when all this stuff gets submitted, whatever first school you choose, they will get access to your DOE file first to consider. I don't know why it's echoing. Is it echoing for you? Sorry. And I'm wondering if I should, for the screen schools, I'm wondering if I should put as my first choice those schools that aren't requiring this essay, because the schools that want an essay, they're going to have to take time to consider it. And in the time that they're considering my kid's essay, they could be awarding, like if I put Beacon second, and that's one that requires this consortium essay, I'm pretty much guaranteeing I'm not going to get into Beacon, right? I mean, I guess I'm wondering how long that the schools take to, I'm not explaining this well, but how long that
No, I think I
sit on your
understand your
application.
question. I understand your question. So I don't think you're penalizing yourself by putting first a school that needs to read an essay. Because at the end of the day, the results are going to come really late, right? We're going to all submit the applications by the 11th, and I think the results are going to be mid-May at the earliest. So that's so I don't think that thinking that somebody at Beacon is going to sit on your essay for a month and a half is correct. I think they're receiving a batch of essays and they're going to have to read them. So first of all, if 6,000 people apply to Beacon, only 5,000 are going to provide an essay. So the first 1,000 is gone. Yeah, I don't believe that, you know, it means that your application is going to stay stuck with your first choice because somebody's lazy and not reading.
I guess
the
I'm
essay.
wondering if there's an advantage, like say we are both applying to Eleanor Roosevelt, which is a screen school, but it's going solely on grades, and Beacon. Should I put Eleanor Roosevelt first? Because whether or not I get in there, and the odds for getting in that are, you know, really low because they've got like a lot of competition. So you put that one first, and that one's going to get passed over quickly because it's just a matter of numerics. It's whether or not you meet the grade, versus Beacon, where they have to read your essay and rank it against other essays. So so somebody who put Beacon first is going to get chosen for Beacon before me. I mean, all the spots will go to people who put Beacon as number one, right?
That shouldn't be the way that it works. The schools don't get to see where you rank programs. And so what happens is Beacon will rate the essays, and we don't have absolute clarity on this, but our understanding is that, you know, maybe your essay is ranked on a 1 through 10 scale. And so they will, you know, fill from the people that are group 1 and have a 10 essay first. But basically what happens is your lottery number tells you in what order they're going to look at your application. And they will, when they get to your application, if they see that you have Beacon first, then they will say, does this person have group 1, and do they have the top rated essay? And if so, then you're in. If not, then they'll move on to your second.
Just remember, right, the lottery number comes into play when there are more applicants than seats. And so if there are 50 kids who make the cut, then, and there's only 25 seats, that's where the lottery number comes into play.
I guess what I'm talking about though is I'm saying that if you put if I didn't Beacon has bigger odds of getting in than say Eleanor Roosevelt, but if the time it takes for them, I'm talking about timing, like Eleanor Roosevelt, they're just going to see what grades you are and then put you in a lottery. They don't have to go through the process of ranking essays. So the time it takes to decide whether or not you're in is less than the time it takes to rank the essay. So
the DOE is not responding to high school admissions applications before May. So, and it may be into June. We've gotten, the DOE's told us specifically that they're going to respond in May, and that's before they did the 11-day delay. So there will be time before their computer program ranks all the students, and that's probably a 1-day process to rank all for the computer program to run through all the students. So it's really, there'll be time for those essays to be looked at ahead of time.
I guess, so then you're saying we should really go by our true order of preference. There's no gaming, there's no particular gaming, like put higher odds or lower odds schools first. Does it matter?
No, you should put your first choice first. So if the school has an essay and, like I said, 50 kids get a 10 on their essay and there's only 25 seats, then it becomes a lottery.
Right.
Right. So it's truly put your preferred school first.
But say Eleanor Roosevelt has like there's 75 applicants for every seat. Beacon has 25 applicants for every seat. Am I better off putting Beacon first because they're going to consider the Beacon thing first?
It doesn't matter. No. So what happens is, so I'll just use say your lottery number is a 5, and 1 through, and so you put it against your first choice. If only 1 through 4 get in, then you go to your second choice. They put you in your second choice, and you're still a 5, but 1 through 4 have now been applied to the first school. So your 5 gets you into your second school. It doesn't, because you ranked one school first or second, your ranking of a 5 is still a value of 5 and goes against all the kids that are applying to that second school that you have. So it's not like, well, you put it second, so therefore the kids who put it first get in ahead of you, and then they go to whoever put it second. Your 5 is still a 5 when they look at the lottery numbers for that school.
Okay.
And the only gaming that you should really consider is if you have a relatively low number or even a somewhat high number, if you're not in the top 25% of lotteries, you definitely need to include some unscreened schools, because basically there are 15% of all seats are in the selective admissions high schools, and we're estimating that there's 50%, maybe even 75% of the kids will be in group 1. And so that's the gaming that you need to do. You may not put a school that you do like better than some non-screen school to make sure that you have that non-screen school on your application, so that you don't end up in a situation where you get none of your schools and get assigned to a random school.
And just to clarify, I'm going to take a step back and to talk about when I just received some additional information on twins. So when you fill out the application, and you list the 12 choices for the first twin, they're going to ask you if there is another child that you want to be paired with this, so that both of them will stay together. Now that doesn't apply to a screen school, or an audition school. If one child gets in, doesn't mean the other one automatically gets in. They'll get separate offers. They could potentially get separate offers. So, but just keep in mind, your lottery number doesn't change whether you're going in for your first choice school or your second choice school. A 5 puts you in 5th place, 1 through 5 in your first choice. A 5 will still be a 5 at your second choice school. They don't fill the seats and then look at who put the choice as a second choice. It all goes through many, many, many iterations until they work through all of the students. Joyce, Mark, can you unmute yourself now?
Yep. Hi. Thank you. Good evening. My child is in the 7th grade. When should I start applying for a lottery number?
Oh, you don't apply for lottery number. They assign it to you. And I don't think you'll get one this year. I mean, I think when you apply for high school next year, it's generated automatically. So I don't think you have to worry about this year.
Okay. Now, when do they generate the lottery number to you? I thought there was a link to email to get the lottery number. Am I not wrong?
So when you apply to My Schools, you'll get an email from the DOE that says you can register for My Schools for admission, high school admissions. When you put in your email address or do the registration for that year, then your lottery number is assigned at that point in time. After your lottery number has been assigned, then you can follow the directions on how to request your lottery number via a FOIL request after you've already registered for My Schools.
Does that answer
Okay.
your question,
My
Joyce?
second question, yeah, kind of. My second question, I know other parents have a lot of questions, so I'm trying to speak. My second question is, can you re-examine the explanation of the grades? So I want to clarify the year end 7th grade. I need to clarify that piece of information. Is it the end of the 7th grade year or the average of all the quarters for 7th grade?
It's your final 7th grade.
So that would be the average, because the final 7th grade would be the average
Yes,
of the
average.
entire year, correct?
For the entire 7th grade, not just that last 7th grade period.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just need to clarify. So it's the average for the entire 7th grade.
Yes.
Okay. And my last question here is, I know you have gone through the lottery numbers already, but I agree with some of the parents here. It doesn't make sense. What is the indications of the good number versus the bad number, and how the computer generates such a number for each student? And based on what, right? So I'm just very baffled by this concept of lottery number. It's very confusing, and it's lottery is based on luck, but not based on something, a number that generated by the computer. And I'm sure there's a system in the back end that explains the algorithm of how you generate such a number, because all you guys know what is a good number and what is a bad number. So how do you define such a good and bad number?
It's a hexadecimal number. So basically think of 1 through 16. The lower the number, the better. The higher the number, the worse. So just like 1 through 10, if 1 was the best, 10 is the worst, that's your range. A 1 and a 2 are pretty good, 9 and a 10 are pretty bad. So in a hexadecimal number, a 1 or 2 is good, and a, was it E or F is bad.
Yeah, there's a full explanation. I mean, if we're going to be sharing this presentation, there are 3 links that are included in the presentation. And one of them, the Medium article, really explains how those numbers work. And they give you, like, if you're in the top 5%, top 20%, top 80%, etc. And that's actually a fairly clearly written article.
Yeah, I posted it. I'll repost it again. I'll repost it next week.
I think you posted it in the chat.
And the way the computer generates it is a string of hexadecimal numbers. So there's basically 16 digits, 0 to 9 and A through F. And the random number generator generates, I don't know if it's 24 or 32 consecutive numbers, but really only the first 2 numbers make a difference. But there's so many possible numbers that they never get duplicated because it's more than 1 billion times 1 billion numbers that are available. And so there's this huge string of numbers, but really the first 2 tell you what your kind of where you fall on a percentile basis versus all other lottery numbers.
Right, but it's still, what is the criteria to have a good number, right? Is it based on a child's
It's random.
location?
It's random.
No, it's not zip code based. Somebody asked in the chat if this was racial. We have no evidence that it's race or zip code or income based or anything like that. I mean, I can tell you about a family that had a really awful number for one child, and the next child they had a really good number. So it really has nothing to do with where you live or how much you make or the color of your skin.
Now, is this lottery concept set in stone, or is there some hope for change?
At this point, that's the
The lottery
that's
is for
the
this year.
rule.
There's really nothing that can change about it this year. It's going to be a lottery.
And
Our only hope is that
yeah,
they narrow the band for the tier 1. Instead of being 85 to 100, maybe they make it 90 to 100, or maybe they break it up into 95 to 100 and 90 to 94.9, something like that. And maybe instead of taking the highest grade out of each of the 4, they take the average across the grades for each course. But as for lottery, it's going to have a component of a lottery in this.
and this concept existed already. I mean, there were schools that already a few years ago pivoted from ranking to a lottery. Like I was mentioning Elro as one of the examples. So it's not new for this year. It was used also for middle schools last year, and it's being used this year as well for middle schools. That's just how they approached it.
The slide that was shown for student A versus student B, the total points that it's gained by the child, does that not have an effect on the lottery, or it does?
No, as long as you're in, first you get your lottery number no matter what group you're in, and then there's you're placed in group 1, 2, 3, or 4 based on your grades. So if you apply to a school that has 100 spots, first they go to group one. And if there are 500 people in group one, they take the 100 highest or best lottery numbers in group one, and that's it. If there are only 50 people in group one, they will take all the group one people, then they will move to group two. And if there are 200 people in group two, but you only have 50 seats to fill, they will pick the 50 in group two by taking the 50 highest lottery numbers in group two. That's theoretical though, because I do think that for highly demanded schools and given the grouping, it is really only going to go to group one.
For screen schools.
Correct. Yes, for screen high demand schools.
And I want to clarify, because a lot of people are thinking that, you know, each school is got their bucket and then they're going to look at their applicants and they're going to say, you know, who all is in group one, and I'm going to take, and I've got 100 group one seats or 100 seats I need to fill for general admission, and I'm going to do a lottery among those, or look at who has the 100 highest lottery numbers among all those people. That's effectively what happens, but in reality, the way that the DOE computer does this is the lottery number tells you the order that they will look at your application. And they will say, I'm going to look at, if you have a lottery number that starts with 00, you're going to be in the top 100 or 256th of all lottery numbers. And they're going to look at those people with 00s, and they're going to say, what is your first choice? And you're going to get assigned to your first choice as long as you are group one. But after they start off doing this for each school that has priority groups first. But after all the priority groups are filled and we go to general admission, they're going to take the person with 00. They're going to say, where does that person want to go to school? That person is going to be sent to that place. They're going to go to the next person. Eventually, they're going to get to somebody, and that person's maybe not in group one. They're going to be in group two. They're going to say, we can't place you at this school. We're going to provisionally place you at the first school in your list that is currently taking group two people, or doesn't have, it's non-screen, and is going to take you because you picked a non-screen school. But then once they get through all of the people, they go through the list an entire time. And if after that, there are people that were in group, all the seats at a particular school were not filled, then they'll go back to people that were in group two and got provisionally placed somewhere else. And they'll say, can I place this person now at a higher school on their list? And they'll go through the list again in lottery number order to do that for group two and see if they can move you up to a higher school on your ranking list.
Okay, so in fairness to everybody else here, we're going to move on to somebody else. Joyce, if you have more questions, we'll circle back, but let's try to get a few other folks. So let's go to, I'm sorry, I might not pronounce your name, Lenez. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, hi. Thank you for answering my question. So if, let's say I have a child who has all 100s and scores like a 400, but their lottery number is like in the D's, so they don't have a shot to go into their first choice?
Well, let's be clear. We cannot say for sure.
Okay.
A D will get you in or won't get you in. A 4 will get you in or won't get you in. That just gives you an idea of where you fall. I mean, just keep in mind, think of it as 1 through 16. A 4 is pretty good. E, which is a 15, is pretty bad, right? We have no magic ball to look into that'll say a 2 is going to get you into Elro. Like
I totally understand that. I'm just saying, the kids work so hard. So if you have a child who scores a 400 in group 1, but somehow the computer spit out this low lottery number, it's not fair for them that worked so hard and not be able to get a chance to get into their, first choice. Like, I know,
Sure.
I guess it's just confusing. I'm
No,
sorry.
it is, right? And that's been the issue that many of us, especially here at Place, that we've been pushing back on the DOE with unfortunately, very limited success on the lottery
Right.
that doesn't take into account merit, right? A child a student, an 85 student has the same chance as a 99 student, right?
Right.
And the school that they're getting into may not be the right school for the 85 student. We don't,
Right.
and the 99 student could wind up in a school that is completely lacking in resources to meet the needs of that student. Right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So
Thank you.
that's beyond our control, but that's what we've been fighting against.
Yeah. And this is why we need you guys to write those emails and contact your politicians. We would love to try to tighten up these bans and make a difference in this year's admissions.
Should I take a few more questions from the chat?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so it's not in any particular order, but so somebody asked, how does the lottery number work with the schools that require additional screening? So there are schools that have two criterias. So they would have screened and additional criteria. So BARD is one. I know there's University Heights in the Bronx also. That's 50% screening and 50% an essay. So I actually asked that question to the DOE, and the response given was the grouping is generated based on the grades. So they will look at your kid's grade and decide, okay, that's group 1. And then the essay or whatever additional screening goes to the school. The school gives a grade or ranks your child as someone they want or don't want. And so then you go through all the group 1s that they want or that have high grade, or if it's 50-50, I'm not really sure how they manage it. If they give you like a 90 on the essay, or if they give you a 1, 2, 3, 4 on the essay. And then if there is a need for a tiebreaker, it's down again to the lottery number. But the catch there is the essay or the additional information that you have to submit for those schools, that is not assessed by the DOE, that's assessed by the school. There's a question about, do we think they will rerun the lottery numbers or use a second string batch of numbers versus the first? I don't know.
Why don't we take a question from Karen? Do you want to unmute yourself? Karen Lee.
Hi, so thanks for taking my question. So my question is basically the same as Linez. So my daughter has 100 average, right? She does not qualify for reduced meals. It's like full priced or whatever, but her lottery number is DE. So, I mean, does this mean basically that there's no chance that she's going to get into any of those top schools?
No, I mean, look, we can't say for sure what, I mean,
I
everybody
understand
could,
that, but
a large number could have applied to a different high school as their first choice and gotten in, right? And then that would, if your first choice was another school that not as many of the high lottery choices applied to, then you have a chance at getting in. But it's just a lot of unknowns, right? That nobody will know until it comes time.
And I want to say, though, that also if you look at the number of applicants per seat, that is the number of people that put that anywhere on their application of 12. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there are that number of applicants that put that as the first choice. But if there are 70 applicants per seat, it's probably going to be a relatively high lottery number that makes it into there. If there are 5 applicants per seat, it's, they might go much farther. They would likely go much farther down in the lottery, numbers. And, somebody might get into group 2 We don't know if any group 2 people would make it into a selective school or not. But if they tighten these bands, then your daughter would have a much better chance, because she would be in a different band than all the kids that got, 80s and 85s.
Do I see, the folks that had their hands up before, is it still, do you have additional questions, or are those just, your hand was just left up from your question? Okay, so I'm gonna put, all right, so anyone who has Karen, Linez, and Sarah, I'm gonna put your hands down. I don't know if those were carryover from before, but put them back up if you have another question. Okay, Karen, okay, hold on. Karen, go ahead.
So how does that work with the schools that require essays then? Like, how does the lottery number play into those schools? Like, will her essay even be looked at? Or do they just go by the first 50, let's say, the first 50 people who make it to fill the seats, and then they read those essays and then they just choose?
I think it depends, but if it's 50-50, like if it's 50 academics and 50 essay, which is the case for that University Heights school in the Bronx, they're supposed to read all the essays, and then they're supposed to look at groups and then create the list of the 50 that they're taking based on that.
So then she would probably have a better chance. And I know, again, that you can't say concretely one way or the other, but you would have a better chance at one of those kinds of schools that requires an essay.
Yes, because presumably what would happen is you would have, the first time the DOE ran through all the people that are applying, that school would only be accepting kids who had the top tier on grades and also had the top tier on the essay as well. And then, and they might have to go on to people that still had top tier grades and were in the second tier on the essay, for instance. And so if your daughter was top tier in both, then they might get through all of the lottery numbers before that school seats were filled.
Okay. And then, I'm sorry, my last question is, for those schools that don't require essays, that go by grades, I mean, if you've got a bad lottery number, the chances, conceptually the way this works, the chances that you're going to get even looked at is very, very slim. Would you say?
Well, I think they're not going to look at the grades. That's the thing. If your child has 100 in each subject, I mean, the only thing that they're going to see when they receive their batch of applicants is the group. So I think your child will be looked at the same way that somebody who has, who's in the same group, group 1 is. I mean, there would not be a differentiation. There's no way based on the grouping that the school is going to say, oh, this is a high group 1 versus a low group 1. So to answer your question, I think what you have to look at is for each school, how many applicants they got in the past. Not that the past is a good prediction of the future necessarily, but at least it gives you a sense of how much demand there is for those seats. And yeah, if it's a school that has 60 applicants per seat, I think your conclusion is correct.
This is very bleak. So
sorry, I'm only the messenger.
No, that's no, thank you. That makes sense. So really our only chance is to hope that they, enough people write in and they narrow the bands, right? I mean, Because someone who, a child that has a 70 average should not be placed in the same bucket as a child who has a 100 average. I mean, that's just absurd. It defies logic.
So
I agree.
what I feel personally is that, right, the deadline got pushed from the 1st to the 11th. And I would guess, or I would be confident in saying part of that reason was because of all the noise that parents made. And they must be considering something right now. And they may wind up deciding not to change anything, but we have a few extra days now to make noise and apply as much pressure as we can. And that, again, we'll circulate the email template. We need everybody to send it and get your kids, classmates, parents to send it as well.
Absolutely.
We've got to be clear that we're not happy with this, and and that we want something else. We want a change that does take into account merit, right? That doesn't really turn this into lottery.
This is not equitable. This is not equitable at all. I mean, really what they're doing is they're setting up kids who don't have a very good foundation, because of, maybe they went to a poor performing school or something like that. They're setting them up for failure as well, and it's a shame. It really is.
And so that's what PLACE has been pushing back on for the last 2 years, trying to make sure that there is merit in admissions, in the admissions process. So, okay, the next question, C. Fang, you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, actually I posted my question in the chat, but I guess you missed it. So I just want to clarify to see if my understanding is correct. So for instance, if a program has 108 seats open for the 9th grade, and they have 75 seats go to the free and reduced lunch students, and they are also add up. So in this case, does that mean a student who is not qualified for free or reduced lunch, and then he's only in the lottery for about 9 seats?
No. So I think that overlaps with Ed Up. So Ed Up means that if you have 100 seats, and let's say there are 3 groups, because I think it's 3. It's like strong, medium, and low this year, although it's not clear how they're deciding it. But it means that if you have 100 seats, the way Ed Up is going to work is that it's going to be 33% strong performers, 33% medium performers, 33% low performers. And I don't mean to be insulting, but just simplifying. But among those, they're going to make sure that they pick, that they allocate 75 of those 100 seats into children that are eligible for diversity in admission. So that means that 75 seats will go to so is your question from the standpoint of your child is not eligible for diversity in admission?
Right.
So your child is eligible for 25 seats, and depending on your child's performance, it may be that all those 25 seats go into the high group. It's not necessarily that only a third of the 25 seats. Could be up to 25.
Okay, so they first take out 75 seats for the free and reduced lunch students. And then 25 seats may all go to the higher grade students.
It's possible. I think the two are working together. So I believe the way it's going to happen, and I'm trying to describe how the computer would work, but to fill those 100 seats, they would first select 33 students that are high performing, 33 students that are medium performing, 33 students that are low performing. And then they would make sure that they preserve the ratio that 75% of those 100 students are diversity in admission.
Okay.
So I think that could mean that all 25 seats that are not diversity in admission could be high, could be medium, could be low. I think it's just it doesn't mean that only a third of those seats would be reserved for high performers.
Okay, thank you.
Let me just address a question in the chat. So in order to be tier 1, you have to make the cutoff for the points, 350 points or higher to make the cutoff. Then for those students that made that cutoff, that's where if they were free FRL, free or reduced lunch, if they're in one of the priority groups, they'll be in the set asides, right? That called the 75 seats that were set aside for FRL. You have to make the cutoff first, and then they apply the free and reduced lunch to the different buckets within the tier, within that first tier, right? So if there's 100 seats and 200 kids qualify for those 100 seats, then the free and reduced lunch students have access to those 75 seats, if that's what the set aside was, and then everybody else has access to the 25 seats. I hope I'm explaining that clearly. All right. Jennifer, can you want to unmute yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for doing this. And if I sound frustrated, just please deal with me, because I'm wondering who came up with this board game of a way for our kids to plan their futures. So continuing along the example you just gave, or the person before me gave, so 75 seats, 75% goes to children who qualify for free lunch, correct? There are 25 seats left. In that band 1 or group 1, there are children whose averages range from whatever we've said, 75 to 100. So my son has a 99 average in honors. And are you saying that he will be grouped with children whose averages are much lower and compete for the 25 seats that remain?
That's correct.
Yes.
A 99 is the same as an 85. Once you're in the band, they're all equal. They're all treated the same.
I would love it if you guys could reach out to me individually. My kid got screwed out of the position he had in a gifted and talented program because of DOE's lack of compassion and understanding of bullying. And I feel like this is one more time that the city is taking away from my child. And I'm sure a lot of people feel this way, but I'm riled up and very vocal. I'm one of those parents that's thinking of leaving the city after having a lifelong romance with it. So I'm willing and able to speak up. This is not a good way to start including kids in a school where you're setting people up. What will the city do when there's someone who's being sent to an inappropriate school and they're bullied in the hallways? When you look and it says 70% of children feel safe in the bathroom or in the stairwells, what happens to 30% that don't have confidence in their schools because of the way this has been planned out?
That's
Just wondering, like, if anyone else feels that way, you're right, we have to do something.
right. And so again, in the chat, there's a couple of questions. After this session is over, we're going to circulate the presentation and the email template that we are asking everybody to send. And included in that template will be the email addresses of several people that we would like everyone to email to. And as we said, get your kids, classmates, parents to send as well.
I'm still addressing some chat questions. Somebody was asking about the EdUp, what that is. So these are schools that their goal is to create like a mix of students of all levels. So they when they have 100 seats, they want to take a third of strong performers, a third of people in the middle, and a third of people who are weaker performers. But I don't know how they're going to do that tonight, if they're this year, if they're going to use like groups, or because historically they were using test scores to do that. But that's the objective, and then they do a pure lottery among those people.
Sue Ann Shulman, unmute yourself.
Hi, I just wanted to say I was on a Zoom tour earlier in the like October-ish, and I was at an ed op school, and the way the principal explained it would work, and again, I don't know if this is accurate today, this is what they said in October, was that the DOE actually ranks every student in 8th grade, and then they dump them into 3 separate buckets, and then from those 3 buckets, they do the match for ed op. That's what the principal said. I don't know if that's true. And I've asked high school enrollment. I haven't gotten any more information, but that's what I heard on a Zoom. So again, don't know if that's accurate, but that's the way the principal at the school explained that they would do it. If that's helpful.
I think, Deb, that's how you described it with the.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's just like, how do they determine if somebody's, you know, a strong performer or not? So I see a lot of questions from people who are getting frustrated because they asked for lottery numbers and they didn't get them right away. So I think you can foil, but the foil process takes a month. I did it and I was told I would get mine on March 8th, which doesn't help. But then I think the email to high school enrollments is what works. Some people received it in 20 minutes, literally, but others it took a week, and they do send by batches. So I received mine and a number of people received it at the same time. And then for 3 days, there was nothing. So I don't know what to tell you except, you know, to be patient, which is not something you want to hear.
Do you want to keep going through the chat?
Let's see. So somebody's saying that Elrose using only 8th grade scores, not 7th. But yeah, no, I don't think so, because it's the trick this year is that it's centralized and that the DOE is the one populating my schools. I went to see my child's grade and so there are the 4 grades and it tells you actually, so this one was picked in 7th grade, but then she got a better grade in science in 8th grade. So they picked the 8th grade first period and so on. So they handpick, you know, the best grade for each period. And I don't think that Elro can say, no, I'm sorry, I only want to look at 8th grade. I don't think it's in their control.
There's a question, what will happen if I only apply to one school? If you don't get into that school, the DOE will assign you to a school. So you should never just apply to one. You're part of your strategy. If you don't have priority for 12, at least you put down schools, you fill out the 12 so that you don't get placed in a school that you would never attend. So in essence, you're filling out the 12 in order to not get placed in a school that you would have ranked 20th.
Yeah,
so I think just put one school down. Yeah,
I think it's important to mention that, you know, no matter if you rank 1 or 3 or 12, you will get an offer. Now it will not necessarily be an offer in the 1, the 3, or the 12. You may actually rank 12 and get none, but you will get an offer for a school that the DOE will pick for you if you don't get one of those 12.
Stein, you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I needed to ask a question about student with disability. So if a school has 10 seats for that seat group, right? Would then they would have the 10 seats and then say 75% for diversity in admission. That would be, you know, you have 2.5 seats left for those that are not, and then your tier group based on your grade then gets applied. Like, in what order do these things get applied?
So there's the different priority groups. So students who qualify for those priority groups will have access to those seats. If there are, I'm making up the number, if there are 20 FRL seats and only 15 students in that group, then those 15 students would get in. If there are 25 seats and 50 students, 25 get in through the FRL seats, And I don't recall, but I thought they said that if those students who are in the priority group didn't get in the priority group, then they get moved into the general bucket for sort of a second bite at the apple opportunity to get in.
Okay, so they don't look at the 100 seats and say 75% total. They would say for the individual seat group, 75% of each seat group should be allocated for diversity and admission.
Well, whatever
I just want to
percent,
get that clarification.
whatever percent of seats that they've decided to set aside for priority groups, whatever the priority groups are. The schools, I know for middle schools, there were, the schools could set aside more or less, but there was a minimum amount. I don't know if the high schools did the same this year. But, just think of it as, they set aside a certain number of seats for the different priority groups. And students that are in those priority groups will have access to those seats, will be the only ones who have access to those particular seats. If there are more students in that priority than there are seats, those students that didn't get in that priority group, I believe, get then put into the general bucket with everybody else for a second chance.
Okay, so first there's the bucket, then they apply the diversity and admission, right?
Well, diversity and admissions is one of the buckets.
So they're not mutually exclusive, right? So when someone falls into both bucket or only one, is there a
I'm not
difference?
following.
So so let's say someone that is in the disability seat group, but not getting free or reduced lunch, and based on their grade, they're in tier 1. How do they, and then they have a lottery number that is, a high number. In what order would those things be considered, let's say, compared to someone that's in, also in the SWDC group, but they are getting free lunch, but they're in group 2, based on their grade, and have a mediocre lottery number, a lower lottery number.
So you're saying if a student fits into 2 of the priority groups versus a student who fits into 1.
Or maybe 3, right? Because they're not independent. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive.
Right. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure if they take it and say, all right, IEP students, you get 25% of those seats. FRL, you get 25%, and whatever else, you get the other 25%. And then I don't recall.
IEP is a completely separate admissions group. So if you're either categorized as, in the IEP group, or you're not, and they run one admissions process for all the IEP seats, and they run a separate admissions process for all the other seats. Now, if kids that are in the IEP admissions process, and that one happens first, if there are a lot of FRL students or DIA students in that, then that reduces the number of those students that need to be taken in the general admissions group. So that is the first set of priorities. And then also zone priorities or borough-wide priorities are run ahead of the other priorities as well. FRL is, DIA is kind of the last thing that's done before they get to general admission.
And then how about your tier group, that and when does that get considered?
Well, if they can't fill all the seats at a selective school, like if they can't fill all the IEP seats with tier 1 kids, then they would go to tier 2 for IEP seats, and they would keep going until they filled all the seats that are IEP seats. And then the same thing would happen in the other priority groups as well.
Okay, so if you're
except-
tier 1 and has a high lottery number, would someone with a low lottery number in tier 2 get put ahead of you, get considered ahead of you?
Somebody with a high, okay, I'm not clear.
Sorry. So someone that is in the IEP group, they're in tier 1, but a lottery number that is a very high number, meaning like, you know, they're a large number.
Right.
Would they be considered after someone that is in the IEP group, but based on their grade is in tier 2, but has a very good lottery number?
Tier 1, within one of the buckets, like IEP, tier 1 would always be considered ahead of tier 2, regardless of lottery number. The lottery number is only considered when deciding within a particular tier and within a particular bucket. When you have more students, you know, then there are seats for that particular bucket, then you decide among them by lottery number, essentially.
Okay, and is the diversity in admission considered within the tier, that percentage, or just within the whole IEP group?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your?
So if let's say 75% has to be free or reduced lunch, is that that 75% is applied within each tier, or no, just for, and is it for all the seats in the school, or just within the IEP, like in the individual seat group?
It's for the entirety of the school. So if you ended up with 100% of the kids, and this won't happen, but if 100% of the kids in the IEP group were all FRL kids, that would reduce the number of the percentage of FRL kids that you need to take in the other groups.
Okay, and if, since there's so limited number of seats for the IEP group, and if that gets filled, you may be considered for the gen ed, or they just move on to the next school on your ranking?
You would, well, you got to keep in mind that they do the thing called the provisional ranking. So they rank everybody, you know, only placing you in school, you know, where you're in a top tier, and then they place you somewhere, and then then they go back and they take the second tier if there's still room for second tier seats, and you may get moved up in your ranking list in a second time.
Mm-hmm.
So does that answer your question?
I guess the question is, you know, we need to kind of think about the possibility of like what's possible, so we don't waste a slot, right? There are only 12 slots.
Right.
I'm just saying, if an IEP student, it seems, you know, that's not a reduced or free lunch, and there's only 10 seats for the whole school, is there a possibility they would consider them in the gen ed seat group?
Yes.
or not at all? Oh, yes. Okay.
They would consider them, except that if your lottery number was really low, and you didn't get in on the FRL group, then when you get thrown into the general admission pool, there's a lot of general admission kids that would have higher lottery numbers. Your lottery number doesn't change.
Right.
So, okay. Unless it's easier to get in the FRL group than in the general harder to get in the FRL group than it is the general admission group, then that wouldn't really help you. But if they have a small FRL bucket, like some schools may only have 20% or something, or 33%. I know of some schools only have 33%. In that case, you might not make it in the FRL bucket, but you would still be considered in the gen ed bucket, and you still might have a shot in the gen ed bucket.
Okay, thank you.
There was a question on wait lists in the chat that I figured I would answer for everyone about discussing the wait list process. And I assume there will be a lot of seats opening up at the regular schools as a result of students accepting offers in the specialized high schools. So I think historically, the results for specialized high schools and regular high schools were announced simultaneously. So there was always this uncertainty that people would, pick one because you can only attend one high school. So my understanding is that non-specialized high schools, when they make offers, they do build some extra offering, like overbooking, like airplanes, except they don't kick you out if you have an offer. But they would, a school that has 250 seats may offer 300 because they know that they're going to lose 50 students who are going to offer to accept an offer to a specialized high school. So I don't believe that significant movement necessarily happens because people accept specialized high school offers, because that's baked into the number of offers that these schools are making already. So I just want to manage expectations there. But there was last year some movement on wait lists for high schools. So things move, and as I said, you are placed automatically on the wait list for any school that is higher ranked than the offer that's made to you. And also, if you don't get one of your 12, then you're automatically on the wait list for the 12 that you ranked.
Are there any more questions? Is that everything in the chat, Deborah?
Yeah, let me take a quick look, but I think we addressed, if you did put something in the chat and it's not there, and we didn't answer it, please let us know. I see Sarah has her hand up.
Sarah, you want to mute yourself?
Yeah, I just again, I'm still having trouble with this idea of how the system works. Is it better if I have a school that has 60 seats for my priority group, and there's a school that has 12 seats for my priority group? We really like the one that has 12 seats for my priority group, but I'm worried that if we put that first, the odds are so low. So I'm thinking we should put the school that has 60 seats for my priority group. Again,
No.
No, because
No,
what
it is
happened
really, yeah.
Go ahead.
Go. No, it's really your true order of preference. So if your child wants to go to the one that has 12 seats, you should rank that one. The school doesn't know that you put them first or second or 12th. So they're going to assess your child the same way. And if the one that has 12 seats says no, it automatically moves to the second one. But on the off chance that you do get one of those 12 seats, that's the one you should rank first.
But in the time that it takes, they're considering my thing first, and they're considering some other kid who put the school that has 60 seats first, say. And so I'm not going to get the 12 seats. And then it goes down to my second choice is the school that has 60 seats. But somebody else put the 60 seats first. So the time it took to bounce my application down, hasn't all the seats for the 60 seat school been taken?
No,
I wouldn't be concerned because, first of all, the number of schools that are going to look at essays or other criteria is very small, right? It's the consortium schools. I think there's 6 of them.
Nest just added. Nest just added
some essays too. But think about the audition school, for example. I would think that if your child is like a child with an artistic ability and they're ranking 12 schools and 9 of those schools are audition schools, I mean, it means that every single one of these schools needs to spend some time watching your child dancing or playing music. So same thing, that takes some time, but they have 2 months or 2.5 months to review those applications. So
no, but I'm just saying,
I don't think it hurts
by the time
you.
it bounces down to my second choice, the people who put my second choice first, they're gonna have all the spots.
No, that's not how it works. So,
No, because, go ahead, Lucas, sorry.
so what happens, all right, let's say your kid is lottery number 100 and doesn't get one of the 12 seats. Then they look at what your second choice is. And they go look at, now they go and take your 100, your lottery number 100, go to your second choice school and rank you with everybody else there. And so your 100 may get you into your second choice school, because if there were 25 seats and the person who had the 25th seat was lottery number 102, you just bumped that kid out. That kid is now going to look at their second school or third school, or wherever they were that got them into that school.
Okay.
So you keep going. So with your lottery number of 100, if you don't get into your first school, then they go look at your second choice school. And does 100 get you into your second choice school? It's not that these people went first ahead of you and lottery number 150 gets in because they made it first choice. No, lottery number 150 gets bumped because you are lottery number 100.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
and I
so I
think,
really got to get my lottery number then.
yeah,
It
and
would be
Jamie
helpful
put it in
to
the
get
chat.
your
This
lottery
isn't
number.
this isn't first come, first serve. It's not.
No, I mean, I'm just basically, I'm like sitting, I have to decide whether to accept an offer to a private school with a scholarship by tomorrow. But it's still going to cost me money. And I wanted to wait and figure out what the public school is. So I should have gotten if I'd have my lottery number to figure out the odds. It just seems like the odds just got so crazy with how they've changed the bands that,
Yeah. I don't think the DOE cares about parents putting deposits to private schools, with all due respect.
I
mean,
know, but we just got a full
No,
scholarship because
know.
of financing. We qualify for reduced lunch.
No,
I mean,
know it's awful.
We're doing it because of the odds.
No, I know, and I can't blame you. And I mean, we all need to do what's best for our kid and to maximize their chances. And so I know a lot of people are going to be making deposits that they don't want to make, and it's a lot of money. But even historically, when I applied 3 years ago, the results came out, I think, conveniently mid-March, which was also after the deposit time for private schools. The DOE doesn't care.
DOE doesn't care, and the private schools want you locked in before.
Yes.
Yes. So there's another question on waitlist and how it works with specialized high schools. So the specialized high schools should send you the scores and the offer early April. You do not have to do anything. They don't ask you to accept or not accept. And the reason is early April, you won't know if you have an offer at a non-specialized high school that you like Nestem or something like that. So it wouldn't be fair to ask you to take your offer to Brooklyn Tech if you don't know what else you may get. So I think that hopefully that answers your question. Once you get both offers, if you get 2 offers or possibly 3, if you apply to LaGuardia as well, that is when you have to make a decision. So generally they give you a few weeks after they send you the offer, mid or late May, and then you have to then pick one because you can only go to one high school. And that means you release the other spot or spots.
There was a question on wait lists, on what wait lists. So in general, all right, so if you get an offer from your third choice school, you're not placed on wait list. You're only placed on wait list for your first and second choice school. If you get into your third, you only get waitlisted for first and second. You don't get put on wait list for your fourth, fifth, sixth, or any of the others. And so then if a seat opens up, you can move up and get your second choice school possibly, or even your first if there's enough movement. But you don't get you don't get put on wait list for your lower choices. Any other questions? But I couldn't follow everything in the chat.
I think I got all the chat questions, but there were some direct ones too. let's see something else.
Are we going to post the recording? I believe that is the plan.
Yeah. Where are you going to post it?
It'll be posted on our website, the Place
Okay,
NYC,
on the place.
placenyc.org. Okay. See Fang. You want to unmute?
Hi, someone posted this in the chat too, because you mentioned let's just added the criteria for an essay. So should we go back to all the schools and check which school has changed their criteria?
I guess you would have to go back and check the ones that you're interested in.
Yeah, I would, I mean, yeah, as you fill your application, I would just check. I suspect also that the reason why they extended the deadline is that, you know, kids now have to write essays and do addition material and so on. And with the break next week, people would love a little extra time. So,
But I'll have to
but I
say,
would
you know,
check,
that extra
yeah.
time came from parents speaking out. Right?
Yeah.
You know,
And the hope that they change the methodology or that they tighten bands or something.
Okay, thank you.
okay, anything else? Did we get, Sarah, your hand is up. Do you have another question? If you want to unmute.
Oh, yeah, hi. I was just gonna type, my hand's up because it was just stayed up, but
Okay.
can you post the link again for how you get the lottery number?
Sure.
I didn't see that in the chat. I just went through it.
It was, I put it in, let me get it again. I'll post it in the chat in a second here.
This has all been very helpful, so thank you very much to everyone who weighed in. It's very.
So I
Confusing.
posted the address. Yeah, I posted the address, and when you email them, you should include your child's name and your child's OSIS number.
Oh, name and OSIS. Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, the address is wrong. I realize it's schools with an S.
Here,
Schools
I'll,
that I'll
let me
retype
put it in
it.
right here. Hold on. I got
Okay,
it.
yeah. I knew I was gonna mess up that one.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think if I remember right, when I asked for my lottery number, at least for the middle school at the time, it was my name, my child's name, last name had to match, OSIS number, and I think I had to submit photo ID as well. A copy of, you know, a copy of.
So that was foil. Definitely, if you foil, you need a photo ID. I don't know about the high school enrollment. I guess it doesn't hurt if you want to send a picture of your ID to show that you're the official guardian.
Somebody is asking, how does Zoom school work? Well, there won't be, as right now there is no remote option. So there is no Zoom school. RS, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Hi, yes, thanks so much for doing this. It's very helpful. There is some chatter about the lottery numbers amongst the parents in my school, many of whom, like myself, have requested lottery numbers. And a parent, got answers from the DOE that she was on the phone with them for like over an hour being bounced around. And basically she was told that people who requested the lottery numbers before 2/7 were granted lottery numbers, and the others of us who requested after 2/7 are being sort of stonewalled and for whatever reason, they're reluctant to release the lottery numbers, which of course is inequitable in and of itself when we're talking about equity. So what is your recommendation if we continue to not receive these lottery numbers?
What district are you in?
3.
3.
That's
why
you,
don't
Lucas.
Yeah, okay. So do you have my email?
I don't.
Here, putting it in the chat.
Yeah,
Oops.
just so you know, CCHS passed a resolution demanding that the lottery number be placed into my school exactly for that reason. Everybody should have access to it. You know, if that's what's going to be used to place children in schools, everybody should have it. You shouldn't be asking for it. You shouldn't be waiting a week. And it should be available to everyone. I mean, a lot of people have no idea that these lottery numbers are used or how to understand them, and it's really not equitable.
So just
to
email.
process that
Yeah,
way the admissions.
Yeah. So I actually, all right. So I'm sort of mixing my hats here. I put my, since you're a District 3 family and I'm the CEC president of District of CEC 3, I put my CEC email in the chat for you. Email me.
Thank
Shoot me an
you.
email.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Think that's it?
Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, we will circulate the presentation and the template for the email that we're asking everyone to send. And that'll include the email addresses of the folks that we would like you to send it to. Feel free to modify the template to whatever makes you comfortable, but just please send it. All right. Any last words, Deb, Hunter?
Yeah. That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good night.